Hey, welcome back to the Hive Jive. We are super excited to talk with you today. And I would say see you, but I can't see you, but I can see a couple of other people that are joining me today. We have Miss Natalie with Be Mindful. Howdy, howdy, ma'am.
Howdy, y'all. How are you doing? I'm so glad to be back. Thank you, John. Hope everybody's doing well.
And we have the infamous king of swarm catching and swarm
Whoop,
traps, Mr. Ken Milam.
whoop, whoop.
Good morning. That's not morning. It's afternoon. Good afternoon or good evening. How's
Whatever.
everybody? How's the family doing?
Hopefully everybody is doing well. We did have a whole line of storms come through kind of the central part of the United States, so we hope that everybody is doing all right. I know that there was some damage in some states, Oklahoma, Kansas, Missouri. So, thoughts be with everybody there on those types of things, and hopefully your bees are okay and you're doing
Oh yeah,
okay. And
yeah.
go ahead. What was
What happens when a tornado comes through a bee yard? I know it just tears up the hives, but do the bees then go back to? I guess they go back to the brood comb that they're used to.
Honestly, tornadoes do really weird things, and I'm not entirely sure because I've seen, tornadoes destroy something and then skip right past something
Oh
setting in the
yeah,
same area that it doesn't even touch, doesn't jostle it, nothing. So it
yep,
could be completely undisturbed to the beehives, but unfortunately, if it did hit a hive, those bees are probably goners. It'd be the same concept of sucking them up in a
yeah,
vacuum. There's so
Right.
much
yeah,
debris and they'd be spinning around inside
yep,
that vortex, they'd be done
yep,
for.
yep, yep.
Yeah, that would not be a good scenario in any way whatsoever. So,
Well,
okay,
okay.
I'm just gonna kick this little ball off rolling here. And as everybody heard on the previous episode, the explanation for the fourth season taking forever and kind of the moral and mental conundrum that I've been having on should we or shouldn't we, and is it right or is it wrong, and all that fun stuff. I'm going to kick this off by literally throwing this question out there at you, Ken, and I know you're excited about this one. So, the main thread and topic that you're going to hear this season
Okay.
through every different interview is going to kind of circle back to this one point because I'm just curious what everybody else out there thinks. There is no right or wrong answer, it's everybody's own personal opinion. So, the
Mm-hmm.
question is, Mr. Milam, do you feel that we still need more new beekeepers that are getting into the hobby or getting into the bee business, and why? Yes or no?
Of course, because uh who's the brain? Einstein said that if bees went away, the human race would be gone in 4 years. So we need bees. Of course, we need bees. Plus, every third bite of food you eat comes from a bee, whether it's beef, mutton, whatever, it comes from a bee because that bee either pollinized the grass or the corn, or well, I don't know about corn, but it pollinized something to make your spinach or uh, your vegetables. It colonized or it pollinated those plants. So yes, we need more beekeepers and more bees.
Natalie?
My answer is a little different. There's actually a lot of bees out there, and the bees in the wild, there's three times as many as in the managed hives, and it doesn't seem to be decreasing all that much because
No,
even in managed hives, you've got beekeepers that are knowing how to split them and leverage the swarming instinct to harvest additional backup colonies and grow them. And so even if they have losses, they make them up. And the other thing that pushes me to say no personally is that colonies of honeybees are very competitive to native bees. And we
mm-hmm.
don't want to keep increasing the pressure on the native pollinators, like the solitary bees and the native bees that are in the United States. And of course, the situation might be different in other countries. I'm kind of mostly referring to the United States. And I would say no because of those two main reasons. but with an additional one of if we want to help the bees, what I would recommend instead is planting, 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 and putting pressure by voting with our dollars for organic, fruits and vegetables, and telling our neighbors to not put pesticides or do not use pesticides and poisons
Right.
on our fungicides, herbicides, all kinds of things. So that's kind of what I'm saying no. But of course, we do need bees as pollinators. We really do that, and our food does. I mean, the bulk of our food supply depends on them. So I agree with you on that totally.
So this is going to go back. I had to go. That's why I wanted you both to talk, because I needed a minute to try to find this article so that I could quote what you actually mentioned there. That's why I was like, oh, I'm not ready. Ken's already done. Natalie, you go. Like,
You bought yourself some
I
time.
bought myself some time. So Ken, you probably haven't seen or heard this one yet, but this was very interesting to find out. So currently there are roughly 100 million managed Western honeybee colonies spread worldwide. About half of those are in Europe, Africa, and Western Asia, where the species was native, and the rest of those are in the Americas, Oceania, and Eastern Asia, where they were introduced. Um, Beehives, though, obviously, are what a lot of people focus on whenever we go through and we're talking about bee populations and bee decline. And there's been a lot of concern and also a lot of misinformation out there, especially when the mite hit Australia.
Right.
Some individuals in Australia were spreading the news that when the mite hit the Americas, it decimated the wild bee populations and they ceased to exist. And so it was only the managed beehives that were out there that people were kind of taking care of. And come to find out, that is actually not the case at all.
Oh,
Um, and let me see if I can find that specific.
quite the opposite. It sounds like
Yeah.
the wild bees are actually helping the general population as opposed to the managed bees, which tends to be treated and therefore a little bit more unfit. So there's a lot of myths that are being, as you're looking for your thing, I was just kind of tap dancing it. No, but there's a lot of myths that are repeated in the world of beekeeping without a whole lot of, underlying justification. People are just going to tell you the same things over and over again, and very often they don't have the data. They haven't, observed that themselves, and it goes for everything, not just the research on colonies of bees, but also all the types of hives, their pros and cons, the practices of feeding or not feeding. All this stuff is a lot of basically just repeating what you've heard without not really in the world of beekeeping anyway.
Yeah. So here's the statistics. Roughly 100 million managed colonies spread across the globe. They estimate currently, as of this research, there are between 200 to 300 million wild or feral honeybee colonies worldwide. So
Million.
up to 3 times as
Mhm.
many managed hives as there are
Wow.
as there were managed hives of actual feral colonies. And these are colonies that nobody is intervening with, nobody's giving any treatments to, nobody's doing anything with. They're out there being on their own, doing their own thing. So if you did math and you broke this down, this is actually really kind of fun and fascinating. This would equate to one colony for every 23 people on the planet.
Whoa.
Approximately, if you estimated it approximately 10,000 bees per colony, that would mean that there's 3.5 trillion individual honeybees on the planet at any given time. And it would equate to 440 bees per person if you
Woohoo.
divided it all out. So honeybees are doing phenomenal without the beekeepers.
Help. Yep.
And that's one of the things that I've often said multiple times is that when people hear the statistics about we lost 50% of our colonies nationwide, the majority of that is coming from your commercial beekeepers that have 2,000 plus colonies. They lose half of them. To them, it's no big deal. They're going to split the other half, be right back up to their number, and move on. But that science right there very strongly backs the fact that, again, the bees know best. They know what they're doing. And a lot of times our intervention is actually causing a lot of the issues and the struggles. So the other side point of it was, in this article I'm not going to be able to find, so I'm just going to give you hypothetical numbers here, so don't quote me on this part. But there was another research paper that came out a little while back that looked at, I want to say it was either Pittsburgh or Philadelphia, and they looked at the amount of bees that were managed colonies in that city prior to the pandemic. And then
Mhm.
they looked at the amount of wild feral bee colonies, or sorry, let me rephrase that, native solitary bee colonies. And they
Mhm.
had a whole bunch of these solitary bees, and they had a lot of diversity and a lot of different species out there. When the pandemic happened and everybody got into beekeeping to save the bees, the number of hives in the city went up drastically. It increased literally almost like threefold. And when they did the study at the end of the pandemic and they went back and they looked at the native bee populations, they were very tiny. There was only a small diversity in species, and they could only find a fraction of the numbers because all of the increase of the honeybees were out competing the food and the forage for all of the native bees and actually pushed them out of the area. So the city, from a biodiversity standpoint, was actually suffering from
Mhm.
the amount of beekeepers that were now introduced to it. So that's why this is going to be a question that is going to carry on through all of the episodes and all the interviews, is because I'm just curious what each individual beekeeper thinks, and how they feel about the thing. Because for me, it caused a almost like mental breakdown where I sat
Oh,
there and I'm like, okay, we exist to help train and educate other beekeepers and to help
yep.
you on your journey and to do better. But are we doing the right thing by encouraging more people to want to get into beekeeping? Should we be encouraging them to do something else to help the bees instead of owning their own colony? And that is why everything just came to a screeching halt, is because I couldn't decide and I couldn't put myself out there and say, yeah, let's bring in another generation and let's create more and more and more, you know? And I wasn't really sure what to do about it. And then Natalie finally said, ultimately, when it comes right down to it, they're either going to get into it or they're not. And if they do get into it or they're already in it, they still need somebody to guide them and show them some of the proper ways and techniques and try to cut through some of the absurdity that can be seen on social media and some of the other places. So finally, I guess you guys can have season 4.
Right, but I would say, doing it mindfully, and it's not a matter of encouraging anybody to get into beekeeping. It's more of a matter of actually making those arguments and discussing those things. And to be fair here, John, to Kim, we actually talked about this article before, and we talked about a couple of those things. So we are putting you at an unfair advantage because we've already kind of discussed some of this stuff, right? So, but this is kind of perfectly illustrating the fact that, that information is not wildly pushed in the social medias and the beekeeping world. And that's something that, John, for that matter, that fourth season is very important to kind of get through, to carry that message and to make people think about beekeeping in a different way, and not so much to try to get them into it as much as it is to be more mindful about everything that surrounds that and how it interconnects our world with a general environment,
Yeah.
basically.
And Ken's not the only one that's at a disadvantage there, because honestly, nobody out there that listens to the Hive Jive on the main platform has gotten to hear this information until
Right,
right
it's
now.
true.
So
Yeah.
there's thousands of you that are right there with Ken that are going, holy crap, I didn't know that. But if you
Well,
were on Patreon, you did get a little hint of that here
True.
recently. So
well, if you're a baseball player, you know it just happened. It was on national news that there was a swarm moved in. No, it's soccer. Was it baseball?
it
It
was
was
Soccer.
the baseball,
baseball.
the
It was
Dodgers.
baseball.
Yeah, yeah.
So, can you remember back
I
in the day
remember.
in season
Yep,
1, we interviewed the gentleman that rescued the bees
yep,
from one of the ball games. One of the
yep,
listeners had forwarded on the information, and we did an interview with him. So, that gentleman did it correctly. He's a beekeeper. He
yep.
actually went out there and he put the bees into, a proper transport box and
Hmm.
carried that off. And this is where John pisses off everybody else. So,
Oh, no, 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 I'm right with you because
okay,
I
I
don't appreciate
saw
what
you
just
like, I wasn't sure if that
uh-uh.
was an oh
Yeah,
shit.
don't get me started because it's a misrepresentation of what happened, and that guy's writing that all the way
Oh,
to
absolutely.
same
Oh
day.
yeah, that
So,
vacuum he pulled. Yeah, that was
well,
wrong though.
not only that, but he quote unquote treated the bees with a quote unquote non-chemical
And then
which
humanly remove them in his
yes.
quote unquote bee vac.
Yeah. So basically what he did is he, you know, if you want to say non-chemical, non-poisonous way that they were quote unquote treated,
He
he
sprayed
very
them with soap.
easily he very easily could have sprayed them with soapy water, which we all
Yeah.
know will absolutely kill them. And then
Yeah.
he just sucked up all the bodies as they're dying.
Yep.
And I
Yep.
saved the day. And then he gets to go out and throw out the first pitch and act like this big
Yeah.
hero, saves
Yeah.
the game from the bees. Well, who the hell saved the bees from him? You know,
He's a
like
pest controller. He applies pesticides, and he actually, from my research, it appears that he was actually bragging about, you know, its extermination of the colonies of bees, right? And so that's fine. He's a pest controller. That's his job. He can brag about that. That there's nothing wrong with that. This is America, you know, this is business. That's fine. What I didn't like is the way it was misrepresented and how it was pretending that he was a beekeeper or actually somebody that was going to care for the bees,
Right.
and they were
No.
humanly
Yeah.
removed. They were not. They were exterminated.
hey, you know what the first clue was?
The
Did you
spraying.
see how freaking shiny, white, pristine, clear
Oh,
that
yeah.
damn bee suit was?
I
Yeah.
think he was
Like
given
it
that one,
glowed in
though.
the dark.
I know,
Had
but I
it-
think they gave it to him for the game. That was not his bee suits, I think, because he didn't have one. Because
He
he's
wouldn't
not a
have one because he's
beekeeper.
not a beekeeper, right?
Sorry, you triggered us, Ken. That was that was a kind of a soft, really touchy subject that kind of got us on
Oh,
the.
I know. Oh, I tell you one thing. I don't know why we have so many swarms around here. Our area here in Central Texas,
That's
I've picked up in my traps 6 swarms so far this spring.
that's great. Congratulations.
Oh yeah,
Great
I mean,
bees.
yeah, and it's crazy, and they're all, you know, they're good bees. They're not. Well, I'm sure they got African in them, but they're not mean bees. They're you know, they're European bees.
All
I don't
right.
know, but I do know that there was a beekeeper up the road from us. Oh, I'm talking 15 years ago that was raising. He had a bunch of bees. His dad died. He died. The guy that was helping him do everything got too old, and they just let the bees just do their thing. They swarmed and swarmed and swarmed, and I figure it's from those bees.
Probably the bees tend to
Yeah.
do a lot better left alone.
Yep, they seem to.
You know, that's a good question though, Ken, because there is a lot of feral colonies in Central Texas specifically
Mhm.
that is kind of mind-boggling because to have, I mean, at any given point in time, there were a minimum, no, there were at least 3 to 5 absolutely legitimate people that did bee removals in the Central
Mhm.
Texas area. There's a whole slew of other individuals that maybe weren't so legitimate,
Oh yeah.
but those individuals, every single one, busy, at least one removal every single day, 7 days a
Yep.
week, nonstop.
Yep.
And yet there seemed to be no end in the amount of feral colonies out there. Now, that does kind of go back hand in hand with the whole, you know, there's way more feral colonies in the world right now than there are managed ones. But at the same time, why is there such a big concentration in that one area? And I think what you just said is a big part of it because there were at 2 different times, there were 2 large beekeeping operations around the Austin area in Central Texas
Yep.
that got big, decided they were going to kind of change the way that they did business, switched over to more like a distribution model, and then literally abandoned all of their hives. And so now
Huh.
you've got these yards where there's 20 or 30 or 40 beehives, and then there's 20 or 30 of those yards spread across Central Texas. And those colonies are left to go feral. They're left to swarm
Yep.
repeatedly every season, and they start moving into other things. And then, of course, every feral colony is going to swarm once or twice every season. And it just kind of, between that and you also have commercial beekeepers that move through the area that overwinter their bees out there because it's warmer. Those colonies can swarm. So there is absolutely a massive influx in bees just right there in that central region, which is kind of mind boggling.
There's a bunch of bees in here,
Yeah,
this part of the country.
Yeah, and it's something that a lot of people probably don't necessarily realize. If you got into the whole thing in an area like that, that kind of seems like the norm, right? But then you
Yep.
go outside of that area and you realize, oh wait, you mean there's not like a feral colony or a swarm or a removal that needs to be done around every single corner? Like that's not a thing. Like,
Right.
Well, since you moved to Arkansas, are you doing any bee stuff up there? I know you got some colonies
yeah, doing bee stuff with air
stuff.
quotes around it. There's definitely bee stuff going on.
Yeah.
Not doing any bee removals at the moment
Okay.
because
That's
we're
what I was meant.
actually,
Bee removals.
yep, we're actually working on trying to get the state to understand the concept of the laws that they've put into place and how they're really not conducive to what it is they're trying to accomplish. So until that gets rectified, it is probably not going to be a thing. Part of that is because they want you to have a pest controller's applicator's license. So you have to go through the entire training, take 2 different
Wow.
tests, and pay for the certification and the licensing. You have to be insured, which I think everybody should be insured, but you also have to be bonded as well on top of that.
Mhm.
And so they've got all of these requirements, and that's for you to do a removal from a structure and charge a fee. Now, if they're a swarm of bees or they're underneath a porch and you're not cutting into anything, yeah, you can go out there and you can do that. That's not really a problem. But they're not as prevalent out here as they are back there. There's not as
Well,
many to do.
when my phone went off, it rang while we was talking a minute ago. It was the city of Llano with the water department calling me to I didn't pick up listen, so I figure he has a bunch in a meter box that needs to be come and got. So
Probably so.
yeah. So and we all know if they're in the ground, they're going to be mean bees.
They could be. They could grow up and have a little bit of a spicy attitude.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's definitely true. So you had mentioned before we actually got on the air that you apparently have a helper again.
Yep. Looks like Max is back,
Ooh,
and
fun.
he's yeah, it's great help for me, especially the 13th. I'm going to go have my knees operate. No, they're going to X-ray them, and then they'll tell me when they're going to do the work on them, and
Hmm.
that'll make it a whole lot easier for me to work bees when I get my knees done.
I can
I mean,
imagine
a
so.
whole lot easier. Yeah,
Yeah.
So in the meantime, Max is going to be out there
working
doing a lot
bees.
of cleanup.
Yeah, I'll guarantee you doing lots of cleanup.
So I have a
We've
question
got,
for you, Ken. So
huh?
you said you have bees in the top of hive. I know it's harder to work the Langstrasse when you have either back or shoulder or knee
Yeah,
problems because there's a lot of weight to the top of that.
yep.
Are you able to work the top of hive? Have you gone in them? You said you saw it, they were bees. Have you tried to peek in there and
The
work them?
the one that I've got one top bar right now that's got bees in it, and we're gonna go work on it. Well, I was gonna do it tomorrow, but I was gonna do it Thursday. Looks like I'm gonna do it tomorrow now. Because John, we're not gonna do a radio show tomorrow. We're gonna do it Thursday instead.
That works.
So yeah. So I think I'll probably go open that top bar up
There you go.
now.
Right.
Put on
No,
a
that's
suit,
good.
put on your Hannibal
Yep.
Lecter chin guard, and
Oh yeah.
go out there and don't stick your chin out and get stung in your chin. And check on that top bar, see what's going on in there. Because if they've been in there, especially if it's a feral colony that moved in, and you've got an opening towards the back of it, there's no telling what that comb looks like in there. They could have gotten creative and
Oh,
and
it's going
curved, and
everywhere, no
yeah,
doubt.
it could be a removal in and of itself, which might be good
Yeah.
practice for you to get back into that too. Is do a removal on your top bar and affix them back to the bars.
Yeah. Oh, and the other thing is that if they haven't been managed, I'm not saying over managed, like you don't have to go every couple of weeks or anything, but at least maybe once a month or every couple of months, they might not be used to any intrusions. It's kind of like a Mustang,
No,
a
they won't be used to it.
Mustang. And yeah, and they might get overreactive initially
I've
if they're
got a
used to.
That's
20
true.
bar top bar right now. I had made it for uh, a, a swarm trap, top bar swarm trap.
Nice.
And I'm probably going to move those into the brood comb. I'm going to probably move those bees in, set them on top of cinder blocks and strap them to the cinder blocks, and that way I can do what I need to with the other comb, with the other
Nice.
box.
It's good to have a plan when you go into the apiary, right?
Yeah.
So that's awesome.
I've got a Langstroth that has been turned over. I don't know when it got turned over. Cows knocked it over,
Oh yeah.
and I didn't have it strapped together. It is just the brood box turned on its side, and the bees are still living in it.
Yep. That's a testament to their natural resiliency.
Their home. That's
Pretty-
their home. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that should probably be the first thing on your list if you suit up tomorrow. Go put that back the way that it should be at the very
Oh, yeah.
least, the stand and
Yeah,
the lid
I'm
on
gonna
it.
do that one first off. Set it on 2 blocks, put a 2x4 around it, throw a strap over it.
There you go.
Then
you
it'll
go.
be on, strap it all together.
All right. Well, if anybody would like to hear the rest of our conversation with Mr. Ken, jump over and join us on Patreon, and you will hear the second half of this. And hopefully, this conversation has given you a little bit of insight and maybe something else to think about in regards to how you do your beekeeping, how you approach it. And if you're listening to the show for the first time because you're super interested in bees, but you haven't started, there are lots of ways that you can help bees. And Natalie said it best: plant native flowers. There's all kinds of conservation type methods you can get out there and do to help all pollinators, not just the honeybees. And that would absolutely work out just fine. If you are a beekeeper and you've got a couple of hives, maybe, and I'm not, pointing my fingers at the two people that I'm looking at here, maybe, but maybe you don't need 200 colonies. Maybe you don't need 20 colonies. Maybe you only need 5 or 10 just to get by for yourself. That would also help reduce potentially the overpopulation and overworking of the natural environment and allow some of those native pollinators to kind of come back into play too. So think on that, and we will be back to talk to everybody next week. But as always, everyone, until then, be good.
And be mindful.
Keep the shiny side up and the rubber side down. Y'all
There
be
you
good.
go.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.
This Hive Jive production was made possible by amazing patrons like you, and we appreciate your support. To all our Hive Jive junkies out there, you truly are the bee's knees.